example at this right here first. Please come here first, because you know what? We're going to help you.
We're going to make our country very safe. We're going to make our cities very, very safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent, and we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this, and it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats.
The president has always been intimidated by the intellectual prowess of black men. And so, of course, he would speak in those petite and puerile terms.
That's just some of the debates over public safety in the city of Chicago and beyond. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily with the Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com and you can find this headline: Trump plans to clean up Democrat-run cities over local objections. Clearly something that's going to be dominating headlines as you see National Guard on the streets of Washington, D.C. to go after public safety there. But Friday, the president was talking in the Oval Office about a big European football tournament coming to the United States, I believe in L.A., and they're focused on public safety. But also, this comes about 2 weeks or so after Trump ordered the National Guard to help with public safety in Washington, D.C. So that's where we're at here with this conversation. I'm Greg Bishop. You can join us each and every weekday morning here live for Illinois in Focus Daily. Get the podcast where you get podcasts, but also don't forget, if you want this headline and others free in your inbox, go to thecentersquare.com, click on newsletter, fill out the info. It is free, and you will get these headlines and more, especially from Illinois as well. We're a nonprofit newswire service, so we also greatly appreciate any donations. But let's get to it, all right? So President Trump in the Oval Office discussing, economic activity with, soccer tournaments coming to the United States. And he also went on to say that, hey, we're going to be starting to clean up other cities as well.
Also, we're going to make our country very safe. We're going to make our cities very, very safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent, and we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this, and it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one, but they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next.
So back in December, this is after the election, it's clear that President Donald Trump's going to get a second non-consecutive term. You had the city of Chicago City Council meet and a slew of residents taking to the microphone during public comments, sharing their thoughts. And at this time, the real focus was the illegal immigration that was pretty profound during the Biden administration over the 4 years there, with 14 million. I think President Trump says it's upwards of 21 million people who cross the border illegally, not through a legal port of entry, but crossing the border illegally. So, there was a big concern there, but the public safety aspect also very important. But back in December, you had residents in Chicago stand up and share their thoughts.
Trump, Tom Homan, make an example at this Negro right here first. Please come here first, because you know what? We're going to help you. We want to forensic.
Ma'am, I would ask that you keep your, hold on a second, stop her time.
You told Trump you ain't going to blink? Well, we ain't either. You ain't above the law. And where you going to run to when Trump pours that Trump card out on you?
There's a 10-year prison sentence when you want to stand up here for those illegals.
So again, that was back in December, Trump saying that people in Chicago are screaming for him to come to the city and clean up the city. Trump was asked again Friday if he's had any conversation with Chicago city officials.
You said Chicago might be next. Are you making, have there been concrete steps that the administration is taking to do that? Or what are other cities as well?
I haven't spoken to the mayor. He's grossly incompetent. I haven't spoken to the mayor. No, when we're ready, we'll go in and we'll straighten out Chicago, just like we did D.C. Chicago is very dangerous, great place. I built great stuff there. I have the most beautiful building in Chicago, I think. But I hate to see what's happened to Chicago. Chicago is our greatest city, actually. Bob Tisch, a great friend of mine, passed away. He used to own the Giants and very successful Lowe's. He said Chicago I think they had their main office in Chicago. He said Chicago and San Francisco, the two greatest cities in the world. Now you look at what the Democrats have done to San Francisco. They've destroyed it. I own a big chunk of the Bank of America building in San Francisco. And, you know, it's just different. We can clean that up, too. We'll clean that one up, too. No, if everything works out, and we've already had calls from other cities, quiet calls from Democrats. We'd love you to come here, because they've lost control of their cities. I'm not going to say, because I don't want them to lose their elections. But we've had calls from Democrats and calls from people generally. We'd love you to come here, because we'll straighten out the problem.
So the president focused on public safety, and you've got Chicago residents who are, again, taking to the city council during public comment, saying that they want public safety, they want the illegal immigration stopped. And then you've got, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who, when the president, a week and a half ago or so, had made similar comments when he announced, this was 2 weeks ago, when he announced that the National Guard was going to be helping police the streets in D.C., he had signed an executive order then that would essentially say that the president's going to deploy National Guard in other areas. Then there's reporting over the weekend that there's a dozen plus states where this may be happening. But again, President Trump saying Chicago may be next. And here's Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson 2 weeks ago talking about this very issue and responding to being called incompetent.
How did you feel when Donald Trump called you incompetent? What did you feel?
All right, he just addressed this. Thanks.
Please answer that question. If you would.
Okay, fine. Since you are begging, I do believe that Donald Trump is intimidated. I think you're begging.
No interruption.
So let me just answer that. I do appreciate you begging. So I will just say it like this, that the president has always been intimidated by the intellectual prowess of black men. And so, of course, he would speak in those petite and puerile terms because he's small.
So Johnson, essentially doing ad hominem here, but you have the Johnson administration putting out a statement that says this, and let me pull this up so we can view it together and you can read it for yourself. But Mayor Brandon Johnson releases this statement essentially saying that we're in active communication with counterparts at the county and state level to prepare for any potential unconstitutional military deployments in Chicago. The governor, Cook County Board President, and I are complete alignment. Chicago is not calling for military occupation of our city. We're currently evaluating all our legal options to protect the people of Chicago from unconstitutional federal overreach. In Chicago, we have effectively reduced all forms of violent crime by doing what works: constitutional policing, violence prevention, and investing in our communities. This past year alone, we've seen a more than 30% reduction in homicides, 35% reduction in robberies, and almost 40% reduction in shootings. We need to keep building on this work. No matter what happens, the city of Chicago will not waver. We are Chicago. We will not bend or cower, and we will never break. And that, again, is Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson releasing that statement after you have the ongoing back and forth about public safety. Governor J.B. Pritzker also releasing a statement, but several weeks ago when the president was making the National Guard movements in Washington, D.C., making statements that he could go to Chicago next, even 2 weeks ago. Here's Governor Pritzker then responding to that.
There is a law on the books confirmed by the Constitution called posse comitatus. And it means that the federal government does not have a right to send soldiers into American cities for the purpose of, well, for any purpose really, but specifically to fight crime, let's say. And that is what he's suggesting that he will do, violate that law. It's not surprising to me that he suggests violating the law. He's done it many times and been convicted of it 34 times. And so I would just say he has absolutely no right and no legal ability to send troops in to the city of Chicago. And so I reject that notion.
And the governor releasing a statement also on this issue, but Friday he was asked about the issue of possibly having the National Guard come in or more federal enforcement of illegal immigration, and even some prospects that some people are saying these elected officials blocking federal officials from doing federal law enforcement could go and arrest those individuals blocking federal law enforcement?
Their threat to arrest me and the mayor of Chicago and other. No, they have not followed. Their threat to arrest me and the mayor of Chicago and other. No, they have not followed up. I mean, I'm sure that they're plotting in a room somewhere with Kash Patel and Pam Bondi to try to figure out some way to come after us. Honestly, I'm unafraid. I'm not daring them to do anything. I'm just saying they don't have a right to federal law and state law, separate endeavors, and they don't have a right to do the things that they're threatening to do. That hasn't stopped them sometimes, I hate to say, but I haven't heard anything further. It's been a couple of days, as you may have read, that since we responded to their latest threat.
And again, that was in reference more to the enforcement of federal immigration law, but clearly something that we're going to continue to be seeing unfold here in Illinois, and with the Trump administration making their moves, pretty fascinating.
Illinois, I love that state. It's a great state, but it's run so badly by Pritzker. They threw him out of the family business, and he becomes governor. Now he wants to run for president. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, we'll sign right here, right?
Sir. This is all a political game. A man who just likes to sit in a pool of bullshit, excuse my language. And I'm sick and tired of every year having to have this conversation. We need to push back against this. And we need to fight back against this. What Illinois did was historic. We made it so we have better, an actual plan when it comes to safety in our pretrial justice system.
That's just a little bit of the conversation from yesterday around the idea of no cash bail and President Donald Trump signing an executive order to withhold funding from jurisdictions that ended cash bail. Illinois being the first state to do so statewide. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, editor at thecentersquare.com, where you can wake up each morning, check the headlines, or get them in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. Lots to tackle here. Yesterday, President Donald Trump was in front of the media for like 3 hours, if not more, at like 3 different events. And the first one, he opened up with some executive orders. And just some background, 2 weeks ago, President Trump said he was going to be essentially putting National Guard into Washington, D.C. to clean up crime there. And in that conversation, when he made that announcement, he discussed the possibility of using the National Guard elsewhere, and also mentioned that they're going to try to end cash bail. And then the following week, you've got the president on Friday essentially saying that Chicago is going to be next for the National Guard. And we'll talk more about that in the next segment. But yesterday, he took aim at Chicago and Illinois and other jurisdictions that have no cash bail, and starting off talking about how it's, he sees it, the genesis of a crime wave in the United States.
One of the executive orders has to do with cashless bail. That was when the big crime in this country started. And I can tell you who did it, when, but I don't want to do that because others followed pretty quickly. But that was when it happened. Somebody kills somebody, they go in, don't worry about it, no cash, come back in a couple of months, we'll give you a trial. You never see the person again. And I mean, they kill people and they get out. Cashless bail. They thought it was discriminatory to make people put up money because they just killed 3 people lying on a street. Any street all over the country, cashless bail. We're ending it, but we're starting by ending it in D.C., and that we have the right to do through federalization.
So Trump signing that executive order, ending cashless bail in Washington, D.C., where he proclaims that there haven't been any murders in the past 10 days or so since the National Guard has been assisting law enforcement there, making arrests and such. So that's one executive order he signed, and then they brought out another executive order with his secretary essentially spelling out what it does.
What this executive order does, it charges your attorney general with identifying jurisdictions all over the country that have cashless bail policies, and then it withholds or revokes federal funds and grants that are flowing to those jurisdictions to ensure that we're only supporting the people who have reasonable common sense policies around crime.
So what area does it cover?
Potentially anywhere that has a cashless bail policy. So some of the largest cities, some of the most left-wing states in America.
Almost all of them, right?
Illinois would be a great example of that, sir.
Oh, they have a great cashless bail. You don't even have to go to court sometimes. No, Illinois, I love that state. It's a great state, but it's run so badly by Pritzker. They threw him out of the family business, and he becomes governor. Now he wants to run for president. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, we'll sign right here, right?
So the president signing that executive order, and the staff member explained it pretty well. It's a short order. It just simply says that the Attorney General is going to compile a list of jurisdictions across the country that don't have cash bail, and then the next step is for federal agencies to find grant funding, contracts, and other types of your tax dollars from the federal government going to these jurisdictions. And this idea of withholding funding in order to change policy. I mean, I've seen people bring up analogs in the past of, well, you know, there was questions of limiting funding if states didn't put in seatbelt laws, for instance. So maybe they would withhold, federal transportation dollars or the alcohol age, for instance. I mean, those types of things, we've seen that historically in the past, and I'm sure there were probably court filings and battles in the judiciary over that. But is that what's going to happen next? And how much money are we talking about could be at stake for a state like Illinois? It's a question that I had for the proponents of the end of cash bail. The Network for Pretrial Fairness, they held a news conference in the afternoon after Trump made his announcement and signed that executive order saying that the no cash bail policies in Illinois are actually making the streets safer, according to the Network for Pretrial Justice. And I asked the network about how much money the state could possibly lose if this thing sticks. And the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois, Ed Yanka, he's the communication director, I believe, there. He said that they don't have that number quite yet, and it might be premature to get there because, well, they fully anticipate that there's going to be legal battles over this idea.
Courts are finding that this is not something the administration can do in terms of limiting these funds based on this policy. Again, the analog to the efforts around sanctuary policies, I think, would be the best one that I've been able to come up with today. And it just simply don't have the power to limit the ability of, to limit and choke off funding to states on the basis of a policy that is really unrelated to the funding that is being given.
And he did bring up the fact that the U.S. Department of Justice, in the lawsuit they filed against the state, Cook County, and Chicago over migrant sanctuary policies, that's been dismissed. I checked Friday for the DOJ to file an amended complaint. They did not file that, and Friday was the deadline for the case to be dismissed with prejudice if the DOJ didn't file that. So that's a totally different issue, but when you get the idea of withholding federal funds because of a certain policy that the Trump administration doesn't agree with, that's going to be litigated in court, and we'll see how that goes. But when it comes to the policy issues, several months ago during spring session, Republicans have been decrying no cash bail, and they essentially said that, hey, you've got some changes that are needed. And State Representative Cam Buckner back then said, yes, it's not a perfect law and the door is open. But when I asked that question to State Senator Robert Peters, here was his response.
I'll just say no. I don't take it seriously from folks on the other side. I mean, they stood there with Kristi Noem and tried to use a tragedy for political gain while that person's mother was out protesting her. I just don't take it seriously.
So obviously, Peters pushing back on the idea that Republicans care about modifying the law to make it better in their eyes. But State Representative Justin Slaughter, who helped spearhead the end of cash bail with the Safety Act in January of 2021, he said that, hey, his door's open.
We do see Republicans and those on the conservative flank more so politicizing the issue. More so than they are engaging in a comprehensive, meaningful discussion as it relates to changes with our criminal justice system. But one of the major initiatives that we were holding ourselves to when we did the Safety Act, when you look at the Pretrial Fairness Act, is holding ourselves accountable to the data, to the results.
And they obviously point to data and results as propping up their perspective on this, but surely there's going to be other stories that really rattle people, as we've seen in the past here throughout the state of Illinois. High-profile cases begging the question about why did we end cash bail. All right, Illinois campaign finance has a stack of things you got to follow, and if you're going to run for office, you've got to follow campaign finance law in the state of Illinois. But the leading Democrat in the Illinois Senate faces a potential $10 million fine for allegations he violated campaign finance. It is Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Each and every weekday morning, you can wake up with us and join the live chat and sound off there. As we, at thecentersquare.com, bring you some of the latest headlines. And you've got election 2026 right around the corner, right? The primaries March 17th, and then you've got the general election in November. But while we're going into election season, previous elections, people were raising red flags about campaign finance with Senate President Don Harmon. I connected with Ryan Morrison from the Liberty Justice Center yesterday to talk about this case because the Illinois State Board of Elections hasn't heard the complaint against Senate President Don Harmon on how the allegation is he violated campaign finance, the self-finance rules of campaign finance law in the state of Illinois, and he faces a potential $10 million fine because of those alleged violations. Here is Ryan Morrison from the Liberty Justice Center, just giving a brief overview.
Well, unfortunately for Senator Harmon, he has run headlong into a complicated system of campaign finance law in Illinois. He is looking at about a $10 million fine for accepting contributions over the contribution limit for his campaign, for his reelect.
So getting a little bit more into the weeds here, Ryan says that this comes down to Harmon kind of skirting the self-finance rules that lifted the caps of how much they can then take in. Because unless you self-finance beyond a certain point, you're kept at a certain threshold of individual campaign contributions. But if you self-finance and blast through that cap, and from my understanding, I'm not an attorney, and I have not read all of the election code when it comes to campaign finance, but from my understanding, if you blast that cap, then you can start accepting donations higher than what the cap was. We've seen this happen with, for instance, Governor J.B. Pritzker. Obviously, he's spent like $250 million, if not more, or something wild like that on his campaign since he started running in 2018 and getting the office in 2019. But some more detail from Ryan about this particular issue and the self-funding conflict that Harmon's accused of doing and facing a $10 million fine over.
But there's a provision up there, me not being that familiar with Illinois' campaign finance law, that allows you to exceed the limits if you do it through self-funding. And that's what he tried to do. He gave himself a large amount of money, and that in order to allow him to exceed the limits, but it would also let his competitors do that as well. Unfortunately, that only lasted through the primary election cycle. And it really comes down to the way the election cycles are defined in Illinois. It runs from January 1st through the primary election. And if he won the primary election, it would continue on through the general election. However, this was the primary election in 2024, which he did not participate in because his election is not until 2026. And so it cut off his ability to get excessive campaign contributions, but he kept donating it to himself, not realizing that the law says the primary election, not his primary election. And now he's complaining that, well, that's not the intent of the law. That's not the way the law was meant to be. And he could very well be right about that. However, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and unfortunately for Senator Harmon, he's arrived at that destination with the $10 million fine.
And that's a lot of money. $10 million is... It'll come, out of his campaign funds, but regardless, that's $10 million. It's been reported that Harmon and his team, they say that the board's narrow interpretation, it unfairly hampers his ability to politic, and it ignores what they say was the legislative intent of the campaign finance law. But Ryan Morrison with the Liberty Justice Center, he says when the finality of this happens and the final ruling is made, what's going to happen here ultimately? When are we going to know about this and get some clarity on the law and how it should be implemented and followed?
Well, I don't really know. There wasn't really an announced decision. after they met last week. Our client, Mr. Nick Benatti, of course, as you probably know, he is very much a campaign finance watchdog in Illinois. And we're just waiting to see whether or not they're going to allow us to intervene so he can be a party, and what the decision of the board is going to be. You see, much like the federal version, there is a bipartisan representation on the board, and they can, in an eight-member committee, a 4-4 tie is very possible. And if there is a tie, then the complaint is dismissed. However, if Mr. Benatti is allowed to be a party, he can appeal that to an Illinois Court of Appeals and then get a ruling from them about whether or not the law applies to Senator Harmon and whether or not he has to pay.
So you're a taxpayer, you're a voter. You obviously, as I can tell from the live chat, a lot of you worried about the cost of living, energy prices in the state of Illinois, gas prices in the state of Illinois, high property taxes in the state of Illinois, these kitchen table issues that you hear about, right? But what about campaign finance law? Do voters care about that? Is this on people's radar? Can they delve deep and sink their teeth into this issue about blasting through campaign finance caps by self-funding and then opening it up? Is this something that voters care about? Ryan, answering that question.
Well, that's interesting. You know, I'm a native Kentuckian, and my great senior Senator Mitch McConnell usually says the electorate cares about campaign finance law about as much as they care about static clean. And I believe they're right. These laws exist to deter quid pro quo corruption or the appearance thereof, but most modern research shows that the public believes the government is corrupt no matter if these laws exist or not. I mean, if we have strict campaign finance laws, the public thinks the government's corrupt. If we don't have strict campaign finance laws, the public thinks the government is corrupt. So I really don't know how much they care about a campaign finance violation or not. I mean, all they're going to hear is Senator Harmon violated the law, and of course that's not good for any politician to have that accusation made against them. But how much money these people take in, I don't know that the public cares that much. They just want good government and people to fulfill their promises.
Will we get that announcement of whatever the outcome's going to be before another election? And it's a great question. But Ryan says it really just comes down to politicians need to follow the laws that they put in place themselves.
No, other than it just shows that when you create complicated campaign finance laws, either at the federal or here in this case, the state level, you can get yourself into a whole lot of trouble if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's and pay really, really close attention to what the law says. Philosophically and personally, the Liberty Justice Center doesn't believe in campaign contribution limitations, and I don't either. But if you're going to have these rules, then you need to abide by them. And this would be a good case in point to say, hey, maybe we don't need all these complicated laws, and we can have a little bit more freedom in our election speech.
Is that going to be the outcome of this, or is Harmon just going to pay the $10 million fine? Looking at Illinois Sunshine, which is a campaign finance transparency portal put together by a nonprofit group, skimming all the information from the Illinois State Board of Elections campaign websites. But you can see here, Friends of Don Harmon for state senate, $14.5 million funds available, $14.8 million cash on hand. So if he gets a $10 million fine, he'll still have $4 million that may help out there. So how is this going to play out? It's a great question, but it's a tough spot for Harmon, that Ryan Morrison from the Liberty Justice Center said.
The statute that allows you to go over the limit limits it to these election cycles, which are defined in Illinois law as January 1 after the general election to the primary. And then the day after the primary, if you win, till December 31st. And the self-funding thing, specifically says you have to win that primary, but Senator Harmon didn't participate in it because in the 2024 primary, because his is not for another 2 years. And, just going by the strict black letter law there, he messed up. And he could be right that that's not the way the law was meant to be, but that's the way they wrote it. And so the Board of Elections is just enforcing it the way it's written.
So
And,
what's going to happen next?
It's just tough for him.
We'll be watching. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. The Second Amendment Foundation seeking the U.S. Supreme Court to review a ban on semi-automatic firearms. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. We've been tracking gun ban litigation for years now. Not just the Illinois ban that was implemented in January of 2023, but also you had the Cook County ban, and that was put into effect years ago. A challenge in 2021. Veramontes v. Cook County that has gone through the district courts where they sided with the county. It went through the appeals courts where they sided with the county, and now the petitioners are going to the U.S. Supreme Court saying that they want the court to decide this question. I talked with Alan Gottlieb from the Second Amendment Foundation briefly yesterday, and here's some of what he had to say is the importance of this case and the importance of getting this issue resolved quickly.
This case was originally filed in 2021, so it's been a long time on hold, so to speak, and we've now been able to file our cert petition with the United States Supreme Court to hear this case on the Cook County assault weapon ban.
So with all of that, you've got, the Veramontes case filed in 2021 before the state's gun ban was actually put into place. So that's now queued up for possibly going to the U.S. Supreme Court. They have to put it into conference and decide if they're going to take this case. But we have the Barnett case, and that's the consolidated case challenging Illinois' gun ban. The entire statewide gun ban for plaintiffs groups under the Barnett umbrella. That was in the district court and went to the appeals court on preliminary grounds, even went up to the U.S. Supreme Court on preliminary grounds, but the Supreme Court said it's not ready yet. Then it went back down to the district court in the Southern District of Illinois, 4-day bench trial, thousands of pages of documents and testimony, and just a lot of substantive record in the Barnett case. The Veramontes case, not so much. And I want to pull up just, the order, for instance, from the Veramontes case out of the appeals court. And this is what it looks like. It's a 6-page document that includes all of the various things that they have to deal with when they're dealing with court cases. So they say that Cuberto Veramontes and Christopher Kaya, together with the Firearms Policy Coalition and the Second Amendment Foundation, appealed the decision of the constitutional challenge of Cook County's assault weapons ban, relying on the District of Columbia versus Heller and New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. They argue the ordinance is facially invalid under the Second Amendment. We addressed a similar challenge to the ordinance in the case Beavis v. Naperville. We rejected the challenge based on the record the plaintiffs have compiled in the early stage of litigation. Challengers that failed to develop a record sufficient to justify a different result. We therefore affirm Cook County's ordinance prohibits the possession, acquisition, and transfer of assault weapons. The law applies to a variety of firearms, including semi-automatic rifles capable of accepting large capacity magazines and possessing certain features. Goes on from there, spelling out how the case was developed and the appeal that happened. And you can read some of this as I scroll through. But ultimately, you have the appeals court siding with the district court, which upheld Cook County's gun ban. So that's where the Veramontes case is right now. But what about that Barnett case, right? I mean, the record in the Barnett case, 7,000 pages of evidence and testimony, 4 days of bench trial with all of the transcripts there. Talking with Alan Gottlieb from the Second Amendment Foundation, he says that, listen, this is all going towards one direction, and that's addressing the issue of can governments ban certain types of firearms.
Well, they're similar. One is on the Cook County level and one is on a state level. If either one gets struck down eventually by the United States Supreme Court, they're both going to be history. The Supreme Court has indicated its interest in addressing the assault weapon ban in the next term or two, and we think this is a solid vehicle for that review.
Solid vehicle. Some may say, well, just wait for the Barnett case. We'll touch on Alan's response to that in a moment. But all of this comes as you've got a mass shooting that happened in Minneapolis, where it's just an absolutely tragic story. Here is just some of that instance in the news that happened yesterday.
Earlier today, just before 8:30 a.m., our city experienced an unthinkable tragedy. Minneapolis police officers responded to a report of a shooting at a mass that was happening at the Annunciation Roman Catholic Church on the block behind me. This worship service was marking the first week of school for children that are attending the Annunciation Catholic School. During the Mass, a gunman approached on the outside, on the side of the building, and began firing a rifle through the church windows towards the children sitting in the pews at the Mass. Shooting through the windows, he struck children and worshipers that were inside the building. The shooter was armed with a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. This was a deliberate act of violence against innocent children and other people worshiping. The sheer cruelty and cowardice of firing into a church full of children is absolutely incomprehensible. Police officers from the Minneapolis Police Department immediately responded, entered the church, and attempted to provide first aid and rescue some of the children that were hiding throughout the building, while other first responders came and EMS responded to rush victims to nearby hospitals. 2 young children, ages 8 and 10, were killed where they sat in the pews. Their parents have been notified. 17 other people were injured, 14 of them being children. 2 of those children are in critical condition. The coward who fired these shots ultimately took his own life in the rear of the church.
So you've got just a tragic story here, and we hear these just horrifying stories time and again where there's a mass shooting, and then you get the follow-up reaction from some, like, for instance, Governor J.B. Pritzker. And I only share this because this is a line of defense that the state and the county has taken as to why they feel they have the ability to limit a constitutionally guaranteed right of keeping and bearing arms, the Second Amendment. Unprecedented societal concerns of mass shootings. That's one of the things that we're going to hear in the debate in oral arguments on the 22nd for the Barnett case, and likely if the Veramontes case is heard by the U.S. Supreme Court, that's going to be one of the arguments, and Governor J.B. Pritzker essentially reiterating that yesterday when he was asked about the shooting in Minneapolis.
Earlier today.
And let's go to the governor over here.
It's awful. This is a pre-K to 8 school. I reached out to Governor Walz to let him know that we would do whatever it is that we can to help him. He should just let us know. I also, of course, expressed my condolences to him and to the families of the victims. And, of course, the victims themselves. There are people who've been wounded, as I now understand, as well as, of course, some deaths. So it's a horrible tragedy. We have too many guns out there on the streets, and we have, unfortunately, a situation where, there are kids and adults who need mental health and substance use treatment, who are often the people who ultimately they can get a hold of guns. We ought to stop that. But they can get a hold of guns and then commit these terrible crimes.
So, again, just to kind of show you how a certain side of the political aisle thinks about gun control after these types of attacks. And, we can get into the identification of the individual who took his own life. He apparently, as a minor, had his name changed to a female gendered name, and just let people kind of deal with that however they want to. But we're looking at whether policies coming from the state or county can limit individuals' Second Amendment rights. And to that idea of the unprecedented societal concerns, I asked Alan Gottlieb from the Second Amendment Foundation to react to that, or what's the counter? Why are they wrong that unprecedented societal concerns over mass shootings is a reason that they can ban firearms?
Well, there are concerns about lots of things. You could use a car to do, a mass killing as well, what we've seen happen around the United States, where people drive into crowds and kill people. But it doesn't, in this case, it's a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. just because there's concerns in society doesn't mean you shred the Constitution. You wouldn't do it for First Amendment grounds, and you shouldn't do it on Second Amendment grounds either.
Another argument that the defenders of gun bans likely will take in the oral arguments, and we've already seen it filed in the briefs in these cases, and that is that these firearms, they say, are dangerous and unusual. Gottlieb says that's really not the case.
Well, I think any gun can be dangerous. In order to be meet constitutional muster, they have to both be dangerous and unusual. And these so-called assault rifles, semi-automatic firearms, are not unusual, and they're not any more dangerous than any other firearm would be. So these people that are making that argument really would like to ban all guns if they could get away with it. And that's just not going to hold up when the Supreme Court hears this case. I think we're going to be on solid ground. And I really believe they're going to take one of these cases, and this one could be the vehicle.
So it could be the Veramontes case challenging the Cook County ban. Or we could have to wait for the Barnett case to get through the appeals court process and then get queued up to be petitioned to the U.S. Supreme Court. And in the Barnett case, on Friday, this was filed by the plaintiffs dealing with a different district's outcome of a gun-related case. Here's the filing in the Barnett case. Harold appellees bring to the court's attention the Sixth Circuit's recent decision in U.S. versus Bridges. In the case, defendant argued that his conviction for possessing an automatic weapon should be reversed on Second Amendment grounds. The Sixth Circuit affirmed the conviction, but it rejected the reasoning of Beavis v. Naperville and created a circuit split. So, applying Bruin, the Sixth Circuit concluded that automatic weapons are arms within the plain meaning of the Second Amendment's texts. Though the modern fully automatic machine gun would not be invented until 1884, the word arms in the Second Amendment extends to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, even those that were not existing at the time of the founding. Indeed, to the founding generation, all firearms constituted arms. Thus, the Second Amendment's plain text covers Bridges' possession of a machine gun, even though the courts later concluded that barring possession of automatic machine guns was consistent with the historical regulation of dangerous and unusual weapons. Goes on to talk more about how the judge there's concurrence explicitly stated why the panel opinion was inconsistent with Beavis. In Beavis, this court, the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, held that dangerous and unusual weapons aren't even arms within the Second Amendment's meaning, but that analysis did not faithfully implement Bruin's instructions because concerns the semantic content of the Second Amendment's text. Thus, judge in this particular case agreed the majority on this is an important point. So you've got that filed in the Barnett case, just letting the Seventh Circuit know, listen, there's this other circuit over here that's kind of going up against what you guys had previously said. So the Barnett case, again, we've got September 22nd when that case is going to be heard in the appeals court, and that will be streamed live, I believe, at the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals YouTube page. So that's going to be interesting to hear that play out, especially, again, because you've got the difference between the Veramontes record and the difference between the Barnett record. The Barnett record's 7,000 plus pages, hours of testimony during a 4-day bench trial, and a record where the district judge found the law unconstitutional. And the state is having to defend the law in the appeals court. Gottlieb says that the cases need to get moving. And here he is in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Is a right delayed is a right denied. And so any case we can get to the Supreme Court quickest is the ones we're going to push. We're obviously going to push all of them, but our interest is getting it heard as quickly as possible.
So he says a right delayed is a right denied, and we'll see where these cases go. But again, we'll be tracking it.
I'm sorry that people want to make a spectacle of themselves by claiming that they're going to leave the state. Look, if you want to leave the state, I would like you to stay. I'd like you to get involved and make it a better place by working together with us. But if you want to leave, then get up and move.
Gosh, where do I begin? He says, make sure your voice is heard. Well, unfortunately, our voice isn't heard because he's gerrymandered this state to death.
That's Governor J.B. Pritzker talking about a movement of people wanting to split the state into two, saying if you don't want to stick around and help, just move out. And G.H. Merritt, the executive director of New Illinois, one of those movements that wants to split the state into two, saying that the governor just doesn't get it. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and wake up with us each and every weekday morning here. The live chat's always popping, so you can go and join in there. But obviously, you can get the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. So yesterday, the governor had two events in Southern Illinois. First one, not really many off-topic questions. The second event, there were some off-topic questions. Previous segment, we talked about the governor responding to the continued prodding of the White House to focus on public safety in Chicago. Well, the final question he got yesterday, again, at an unrelated event, was a Southern Illinois reporter of sorts saying that, hey, there's a lot of people across the Southern Illinois area that want to split the state into two. And I think actually the question was they want to become part of Indiana. That's conflating a whole bunch because there's different movements here, as I'm finding out as I continue to report on this, right? So you have the dozens of counties across the states that have non-binding resolutions that they've been voting on for years, like the past 7-10 years or so, it seems. They've had these non-binding resolutions come up, and overwhelmingly they win, essentially saying that, hey, they want to split the state into two, leave Cook County by itself, and let's make a different state. Then you have another effort. It's the New Illinois effort, and they're actually trying to get a constitution put together and to get legislators on board and to have that conversation to where they could just pass a resolution in the state to have Congress then act to create a new state. So you've got that effort as well. Plus, you've got another effort of Indiana that has passed a resolution creating a bi-state, commission to investigate redrawing Indiana and Illinois lines. Illinois not taking part in that, but Indiana did pass that. It was signed into law. That commission has been created, and we'll see what happens there. But those aren't all, the same. They're not mutually exclusive. They're operating on their own. So you just got to be careful when you're, talking about these things to understand that there's multiple paths here. And this is not something that's just happening in Illinois. It's happening also in California. And if you go to thecentersquare.com and go to the California page, you'll see some of the reporting there as well, as some Republicans in California have looked to try to split the state into two. So you can go and read more about that, along with other efforts in California. But back to Illinois in focus here. You've got the governor being asked about this in Southern Illinois, and here's his response.
Partisans and people who don't support the fact that this is mostly a Democratic state are looking for any way to get attention. And so they talk about and push the idea that somehow counties in Illinois are going to leave, get up and join another state. That's not going to happen. That's not how it works. If they really want to get involved, they should actually show up, vote, make sure that their voices are heard. I've done that my whole life. I think I've been in areas, lived in areas that were Republican controlled as a Democrat. You got to speak up. You got to talk to people. I listen to Republicans all the time. You have a state senator here, Dale Fowler, who's been a partner of mine in bringing economic development to the area, bringing more investment in our state parks. And we've worked closely together. We believe in, that roads, state parks, these are not partisan endeavors. These are bipartisan things that everybody needs, no matter what party you belong to. So I'm going to continue to act in that fashion. And, I'm sorry that people want to make a spectacle of themselves by claiming that they're going to leave the state. Look, if you want to leave the state, I would like you to stay. I'd like you to get involved and make it a better place by working together with us. But if you want to leave, then get up and move. And there's no chance that you're going to pick up a county and have it join another state.
Illinois obviously has seen outbound migration for 10 years straight. And the only reason for the 11th year we didn't see that was because we had international migrants coming into Illinois exceeding the number of domestic residents that were leaving the state of Illinois. So people are leaving. They're choosing to pick up their belongings and go to another state. People are even moving from Illinois to New York. But you've got people moving from Illinois to Florida and Texas and Missouri and Kentucky and Indiana and so on. So obviously, there's that it's already happening. But the governor's saying that, and in the past, he's denied population decline. But now he's saying if you don't want to stick around and help, go ahead and move. Well, I reached out to G.H. Merritt. She is the executive director of New Illinois. It's an effort. It's been around for about 7 years. They've got a constitution drafted, and they're working out different types of issues to try to get legislators on board with the idea of splitting the state in two. And it's a very arduous process in the politics of it all, definitely playing into account here. But I shared with G.H. Merritt Pritzker's comments from yesterday afternoon, last night, and she had this to say about what the governor said in front of news cameras.
Gosh, where do I begin? They have so many thoughts about this. My first thought, of course, is that, you've got a state where right now there's 70 of your 102 counties have a state split movement going on. Either they voted for the referendum, or they have a New Illinois county committee, or both. One would think that if you're at the helm of a state and this is going on, you would at least be a little curious about why are these people thinking this? Why are these people wanting to do this? He has no curiosity about that. He makes assumptions. He makes the assumption, he says, oh, well, you got to get out there and vote. Well, there are many, many people in this organization, and I'm willing to bet that all of them vote every time and have for years, because they are committed citizens and residents of the state. He says, make sure your voice is heard. Well, unfortunately, our voice isn't heard because he's gerrymandered this state to death. And I found it preposterous and sad that the legislators from Texas came to Illinois, and under the protection of J.B. Pritzker, who stands up and acts all sanctimonious, like he wants to make sure people's voices are heard. And you compare the gerrymandered Texas map to the Illinois gerrymandered maps, and Texas is amateur compared to Illinois. And so, we aren't a partisan group. That's another thing that he gets wrong. He gets it wrong because he doesn't care, and he's never asked. He's never sat down with any of us to find out what the story is. And the story is that in the state of Illinois, if you don't live in Cook County, you have no voice. And it dates back to Reynolds v. Sims, where they changed the way that state Senate's seats were, the districting was done. And Everett Dirksen, our late great senator from the 1960s, warned that in any state with a sizable city, all the power of state government was going to be absorbed into that city, and the rural people would lose their voice. So I think that he's very disingenuous. He pushes for things that may be great for an urban area, but they're not great for rural small town areas at all. But if you care, Governor Pritzker, about people having a voice in Texas, why don't you care about the fact that many, many of the people in this state have no voice because you've stolen it?
And G.H. Merritt, the executive director of the organization New Illinois. And I asked her, listen, I mean, you've got the governor saying, if you don't want to stick around and help the state improve, then you can go ahead and move. And here's what she had to say.
Well, and when we started this organization, I started it with a guy named Jeff. And my husband and I were thinking about moving. And because it was like, hey, I don't know where we're going, but we ain't staying here. But my father built my house, and he had since passed away. And I didn't want to sell my house. And it was like this epiphany moment of realizing that the corrupt politicians in the state were pushing people out, including me. And so I decided, and Jeff decided, that we were going to stay and fight for our home. And so he really doesn't know what he's talking about. And he also says this is never going to happen. Well, you know, we've been watching the state of Illinois for 8 years now, and we see that you are on a path toward going over a financial cliff. And as you get closer and closer to that cliff, we believe that we'll be able to negotiate with some of the people in the legislature, because the fact is a resolution doesn't require the governor's signature. So that's all I got to say. We're not giving up because he says it isn't going to happen. It happened in Maine, it happened in West Virginia, and 3 other states.
And it's also something that's being discussed in other states as well. As I mentioned earlier, you've got the team at thecentersquare.com in California with this headline: GOP legislators propose creating new states from California counties. Republicans are calling for 35 inland counties to secede from California, creating a new state. And GOP announcing that plan Wednesday as their response to Democrats' congressional redistricting efforts. And you can go read that story and even see video of them talking about the rationale behind why those in California are wanting to split the state into two. And it's very similar to the reasons why people in Illinois want to split the state in two. From what I've gathered in reporting on this for years, it's the economic issues, it's the high taxes, it's the lack of accountability to address these issues, it's the social issues, the education mandates, the gun ban, for instance, these types of things that the rest of the state feels that they shouldn't necessarily have to be burdened by at the whims of those who live in the urban center of Chicago. And then you get into the debate of just exactly all the relationships that are made between rural and urban and how they support each other and which one's taking more tax dollars and so on. But all of those things obviously also have to have the discussion of the debt that this state has, the $140 billion unfunded pension liability, and how, if this was to happen, a split in the state, how that would be divvied up, because most of the downstate area has those teachers in it that are driving a lot of the unfunded liability with the state's pension funds. So those conversations obviously have to happen before we get to any new lines being drawn and how that's going to play out. But regardless, G.H. Merritt with New Illinois talking about how this is a movement that is happening not just in Illinois but in other states, and it points to a certain direction.
It's just going farther down that road of what Reynolds v. Sims caused. It's not likely to ever be overturned because it's considered one of the landmark rulings of the 20th century. It's where we get that term, one man, one vote, that sounds so fair. But the fact is, the states followed the pattern of the U.S. Congress in the way they did their districts, and by taking that away, they did what our founding fathers were trying to avoid with the states. They didn't want the big ones to overpower the little ones, and then the little ones wouldn't have a voice. It's all about protecting the voice of the minority. And so I think that we can have a conversation later about what's going on in California, because I did have a conversation yesterday with Paul Preston from New California. And but yeah, I mean, he still thinks we're trying to become part of Indiana. And that isn't even true either. That's something Indiana initiated. And I might as well tell you, Governor Pritzker, that the reason they're doing that, they know this idea is not going to happen. They know that you'll never appoint the people to this commission. They're doing this to send a message to you and Mayor Johnson that the Northwest section of Indiana has an economy that is entwined with Chicago. And what you are doing in the way you guys are running things is, it's not just hurting you, it's going to be hurting Indiana. And they're trying to get that message to you. Chicago is on its way to being the next Detroit.
Again, G.H. Merritt, the executive director of the organization New Illinois, responding to Governor J.B. Pritzker saying, well, if you're not going to stick around and help the state, then why don't you just move? As counties line up non-binding resolutions saying they want to split the state into two, and Indiana is looking at redrawing Illinois-Indiana lines, this is going to be an ongoing story. You look at the latest at thecentersquare.com. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. Obviously, those watching live, for some reason, I'm not sure why, but about 25 minutes or so into the show, even though I'm hardwired in with super blazing fast internet, YouTube just decides to lose connection, and I got to restart it. So if you missed out on that little chunk there of the restarts, don't worry. I record the segments locally, so those can be uploaded in raw format, and you can watch that in its entirety with no breaks. Or you can get the podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus, and you'll find it. And wake up with us each and every weekday morning here for Illinois in Focus Daily.